Hello and welcome to Stay Energetic, a podcast dedicated to our favourite Belarusian football team, the mighty Energetik BGU. Thank you so much for joining us on our weekly journey through the main talking points of Energetik's last match. Once we've covered that, we'll move on to our thoughts on how we see the next one panning out, and anything else Energetik related that we think you might want to hear.
Привет, я Liam.
And I'm Dan.
Welcome again to you all. And without further ado, we'll start discussing last weekend's rather disappointing reverse against FC Minsk. I think the first thing to say, Dan, is that we felt that initially there was certainly the effort. We talked a bit last week about feeling a bit disappointed by a lack of team spirit, and they were playing as a bunch of disparate individuals. I certainly think in the first half we saw a distinctly more focused and cohesive attitude in terms of how they approached the game. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, it couldn't be much worse, could it? I suppose. We were both sat here a week ago and we were looking at that game, and I don't want to talk about it anymore, to be honest with you. I've had enough of it, to be perfectly honest with you. It was an abysmal performance. Yes, things were better. And as the game went on, we definitely saw a more cohesive team dynamic. But then you have to bear in mind, some of the players in the previous game had only been there for 24 hours, 48 hours. So the idea that they'd somehow kind of just jump into a squad and suddenly be this cohesive unit is somewhat ridiculous anyway. So yes, the early prospects, I suppose, were a lot more positive. And we got the first goal, not necessarily in the run of like us looking a lot better, but we did get the first goal, and I believe it was a deserved penalty, irrespective of what the defender was suggesting.
The defender did seem to have a rather interesting reaction. He looked completely staggered by the award, which I have to say, Dan, I mean, I've seen it a few times in replay. I'm not quite sure why he was surprised it was a penalty.
No, he pretty much had every part of our players. He had his arm, he had him around his waist. I wouldn't surprise if he had him around the neck at one point. I don't think he did, but yeah, he had him in every which way, and then suddenly turned around with arms out, thrust out, going, "What are you doing, Gov?" You know. Yeah, absolutely stone cold, no issues, and coolly taken. Because one of the big questions actually when you actually were going was who was going to take the penalties, and he took it well, I thought.
Yeah, you just absolutely smashed it home. And I was thinking, brilliant, excellent. You're going to get to half-time, 1-0 up, the crucial lead at the interval. And then, unfortunately, I suppose my first thought was that the player who won the penalty for FC Minsk shouldn't have been on the pitch. I felt he should have had 2 yellow cards by that stage. But there's still really no excuse for the naivety that Moatu displayed in a situation where he had absolutely no need to make the challenge that he did.
Yeah, and I think we had quite a lot of discussion on this when we were talking about the live show as well. I mean, the first yellow he received, as far as we were concerned, should have been his second. He did pretty much I can't remember exactly the foul, but my memory serves, it was worse than the second, actually, if memory serves me. Just he really seemed to struggle with Moatu down that side, and he took him out a few times. And one of the things I hate to try and pretend that I can get into a player's mind or anything, but you do wonder if you've been taken out a few times by the same player and suddenly they're coming up your end, do you try and kind of leave a bit of something in on them, possibly? Or is it just pure naivety? I don't know. But yeah, Moatu, completely unnecessary. Really unnecessary. The guy wasn't going anywhere. He could have been shown outside. There was absolutely no need to go in on him like that. So whether it was naivety or a bit of malice, maybe to kind of get back at him, I don't know, but it wasn't needed.
I think the frustration, maybe from Whitey's perspective, he felt that in recent weeks, I think Sokol coming back into the team was a big advantage to us this week, and Sokol had taken a really good position, I think, just behind Moatu, ready to make the challenge if the 29 or 28, I can't remember which number it was, had gone past him. And maybe Sokol hasn't been there for the last few weeks. And Moatu, I do remember having made a few last-ditch challenges. And to be fair to him, we've talked about how he's improved his tackling over the last few weeks, having looked very ill at ease at left wing back. So maybe he just felt he had to make the challenge. But I can't help feeling he should have been aware that Sokol was behind him. And as you say, not really in any danger of conceding a goal from out on the right wing, just inside the penalty area. Just silly. And it changed the whole course of the game. I felt that FC Minsk had been in a poor run recently. We know they haven't won for a number of weeks. And from being in a situation where they were again behind at half time, they went in with their tails up, 1-1, and then, of course, scored very soon after the restart. And then after that, it just went downhill, didn't it, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Worst time to play for an opposition team to score against you is either going to be just before halftime or just after halftime, because it just gives you that jolt. They came into that second half thinking maybe they could get something out of this, and they did.
I think I have to say we've talked a lot about Jacques Boisy-Rum over the last few weeks, and we've had various opinions about him. I do still find I don't quite understand his situation. I mean, obviously we sold him last week to Bate Borisov, I think, for a snip at $20,000, if that's the correct price. I think that's a bargain. I think he'll go on to be a very good player for them. But we then were allowed to keep him for the rest of the season. We have obviously in recent weeks lost both Yakshabova and Tway, who I think we both accepted two of our more creative players. But yet we still seem to start Umarov every week and then take him off after 60 minutes. He doesn't get more than 60 minutes. He doesn't look happy to me with that arrangement. I'm not sure if there's something more to it that we don't know about. But I think with such a clear-cut situation of chasing the game 2-1 down, to take off a player who is a bit inconsistent, but does offer that vital edge of creativity was a strange decision. And I just wonder if there's more behind this, because we have heard before that he's not had a proper pre-season, and that's one of the reasons why he's not as fit as he should be. But my view is if he never gets 90 minutes, how on earth is he supposed to get any more match fit? And if we're going to keep him for the rest of the season, let's make the most of him. And it really didn't work in our favour this week.
Yeah, it's slightly odd, isn't it? I mean, I understood it more when I heard about the fact he hadn't had a proper pre-season, because that really did explain the first half maybe of the season, kind of thinking about if he didn't come into it fully fit and he needed a bit of time to build up. But you kind of think at some point he must have built up that fitness. He is one of our more creative players, and especially, as you say, we actually both away. He kind of naturally kind of fits in more with that kind of that role. I don't understand it. I don't want to play the player down. I've always used to talking about him being a super sub and coming on and running at tired legs and whatnot, but he shouldn't have to be. I kind of feel like there should be a more rounded player there. As you say, maybe there's something we don't know about, but clearly the player, as you say, doesn't really look that happy about it. So maybe it's not entirely his choice.
And I think that on Sunday, I felt that the situation was compounded by the fact that although I was cross with Morata for his silly naivety in giving away the penalty, he then did seem to represent one of our more our better attacking options, and then he was taken off as well. And a strange decision, unless he was injured. I did see a little bit of dissent towards one of his teammates just before he was taken off. I wonder if he was almost having a lesson made of him because of that. He seemed to have a go at Sokol about something, and then literally 90 seconds later he was withdrawn. But again, I mean, if we then put Gears on at left wing back, I think we're not convinced by Gears' defensive capabilities anyway. He's certainly not a left wing back. I'm not sure he's any sort of wing back. Really puzzling, and therefore we then had two players in Umarov and Moati, both of who offer us pace and creativity, both off the field for the last 25 minutes or so, replaced by Gears at left wing back, no idea why, and then dear old Junior up front, who ran around as usual and didn't really make much of an impact, as is unfortunately he's prone to doing. So the last half an hour really just petered out, didn't it? It was dreary in the extreme and incredibly frustrating against a team who were well organised and worked hard for each other, but really shouldn't have been the kind of team we should be losing to, and certainly not a team that we should be losing to if we have any aspiration of finishing in the top 4 or 5 places.
Yeah, I've always said a little bit of sympathy for certain players. Moati is one of those. He's not a defender. That's not his role. That's not what he should be doing. He's shown enough going forward. That's what he clearly is designed to be. We don't seem to really have a plan for who should be, at the back there. And it really shows in these moments. He really could have done a lot more going forward if he'd have stayed on. And sorry, it's frustrating sometimes because you look at these players and you kind of think there's clear absences, but we don't know necessarily why we're not plugging them. And I don't know how we go about kind of adjusting to that? And because we've spoken a lot about, this is our new club, this is our new team. How do we adjust to the idea that our best players get sold off all the time? And how do we adjust to the fact that we don't necessarily plug obvious gaps? And it's something I'm trying to get my head around.
I just don't know why some of the decisions are made. I have to say, but again, we don't know all the ifs and whys and wherefores. So the bottom line is we lost. It was disappointing. It's a game we should have won. And as always, Dan, we have to talk about these matters. Sometimes we talk about them more briefly than others, like last week. But our bottom line has always got to be, we'll move on, we'll look to the next game. And in the last couple of weeks, we've basically got a couple of opposition fans on to talk about what's going to be going on with the team that we're facing at the weekend, in terms of a little bit about the team's history, etc. And this week we thought, you know what? In our midst, we have a real expert on pretty much every other team in the BPL. So I'd like to give a really warm welcome to John Blackwood, our resident preview and review writer, who is going to give us a bit of the lowdown on Torpedo, because as always, we know a little bit about them, Dan, don't we? But not an awful lot. And I think John could tell us far more. So John, would you mind starting us off just by giving us a little bit of the history of Torpedo, how they came about and what they're most renowned for, really?
Oh, hi guys, and it's nice to be with you on the podcast. Look, Torpedo are one of 3 clubs in the centre of the country within a 15-mile radius of one another. To the north, you've got Bata, of course, and that's the big derby between Bata and Torpedo. And Torpedo's manager, Yuri Puntus, made his name at Bata. He took the reformed Bata in the 90s from the 3rd tier to the Belarusian Championship, basically, and started that club off as the serial champions that they became. And to the southwest, you've got Smolovici, obviously a little village club. Puntus was also manager there for a couple of years. Torpedo have been around since the early 60s. They're a car factory club. Torpedo was the name the Soviets gave to teams for car workers. Zhodino, where they're from, is dominated by this factory that makes huge mining trucks, the biggest in the world. There's not too much else there, I don't think, other than the factory and the football club. They're pretty much a fixture in the Belarusian top flight. They were in the 2nd tier for a bit in the 90s, but since then they've been a top flight club, although they've never won it. In the last 7 or 8 years, they've finished between 4th and 7th reliably. They've won the cup once, but they've never won the league. So they're one of these clubs, if you were thinking of an equivalent, an English club, it would be like, an Everton or someone like that, a club that's always in the top 8 or 9, but never really going to win very much other than the odd FA Cup,
And you'll know from the previous podcasts, obviously, I don't pay much attention to the other teams. I really don't. It's not my interest. I'm not even going to pretend to go down that route. I keep a vague idea, and Torpedo seem to start quite well this season, but it seems to have drifted off. How are they doing lately this season?
Well, you're quite right, Dan. I mean, when I looked at Torpedo in the first few games, they looked a really competent, well-drilled side. I'm thinking back to when they demolished FC Minsk 5-2 on their own park, and they looked a really top side that day. Sadly, for people that follow Torpedo, that's about as good as it got. They've really tailed off in the last 9 games. They've only won twice in that period. You may remember there was a rumour that Torpedo had coronavirus. It was never confirmed or denied, so we don't know for sure. We were told that their first choice goalie, Vladimir Bushma, had it, that several of the backroom staff had it. And around that time, Bushma disappeared. He's only played 1 game in the last 10, I think, and he's not been in the other 9 squads. So we don't really know if that's been a factor in their decline. But the last few games I've watched them, they've been really turgid, really boring. They beat Vitebsk 1-0, and that was almost unwatchable. They got hammered by Shakhtar at home, and that was a real marker for them because Shakhtar are serious title contenders, as everybody knows, and they strolled away from Torpedo in the second half of that game. And then we had the Dinamo Minsk game last Sunday, where I think Kuchuk threatens his players with banishment to Siberia if they spend more than 3 minutes out the regulation 90 in the opposition penalty box. And it was unwatchable. It was real mind fungus. So hopefully the game on Sunday, however it goes, will be better than that.
So who are the key players? Who's going to have to be on their game in order to get a result for Torpedo?
Well, happily for our young guys, they're up against an all-Brazilian midfield on Sunday. The star of the show, of course, is Gabriel Ramos, who had a wonderful start to the season. He's a guy that can turn a game in its head just with a little flash of genius, even if he's anonymous for the rest of the game. In the middle of the park, you've got Lipe Veloso, who's an interesting wee player. He's already played in Japan and his home country. He was in Georgia for a couple of years before coming to Belarus. And they've just signed a new guy from Brazil as well, who made his debut last Sunday against Dinamo Minsk in midfield alongside Lipe Veloso, called Mateus Moreira. So they've got a very strong and exciting midfield potentially. The less flashy players, well, you'd have to look at the captain, Andrei Kakaturian. He's in his 5th season now in Giorgino. Nearly played every game this season in defensive midfield in front of the back four for Torpedo. I suppose perhaps at the back you'd be looking at Maxim Bordachev, who bizarrely is on loan from Shakhtar despite being a full international with 45 caps to his name. But obviously, Yuri Vernadou decided he was surplus to requirements down there and let him go on loan to Torpedo for the season. He's getting on a bit now, but still a very, very steady player at left back or at centre half. So those are the guys I'll be looking out for. The other guy, perhaps to keep at the back of the mind, is Dmitry Antilevsky, centre forward. 6 goals in 11 games for the Belarusian 21s. He's not made it to the national team just yet. But he's obviously the centre forward that they had. I think he was called Gorbachev. Moved on to Latvia this week. He didn't play in the game against Dinamo. And Antilevsky took his place, and clearly Yuri Puntus, the manager, is looking to Antilevsky as a young guy let go by Dinamo Minsk last season to come in and do a job up front for them.
We seem to go on this run of 3 or 4 games of winning, 3 or 4 games where we don't, 3 or 4 games we win, 3 or 4 games we don't. We've had this weird wave effect kind of going through the Energetik side. But taking Energetik hat off and kind of looking at it from a more unbiased approach, what do you think's going to happen?
I think on paper, you couldn't see past the Torpedo win this weekend. But the good news for us is that Torpedo have been really poor recently as well. My fear is that Yuri Puntus will see this as a really good chance for them to get back on track, with us obviously lacking in a bit of confidence and had some bad results lately. I think it's going to be a tight game. I don't think there'll be many goals in it. Torpedo's defence is very strong indeed. if someone pushed me, I would say goalless draw or 1-0 to Torpedo. I just feel at the moment that Energetik are in a real trough. We've got a lot of new players in. These players are still getting used to one another. I think probably Vladimir and the coaches are trying to work out how best they can be played, and they've not quite got there yet. So I think we're going to need to have a bit of patience.
Yeah, I mean, this weekend's a bit of a weird one because, as I say, we had that really bad result 2 weeks ago. We've had a bit of a turgid result last week. This does fall within the pattern of what we usually do, but at the same time, you kind of, I don't know why, but this next game kind of feels like it really needs to be a win from an Energetik side. I don't know why. I feel like it needs it more. I guess it's because we've lost 2 key players. And just an idea that actually that might be okay is a reassurance that I'm kind of reaching out for.
Energetik remind me of a club like, I don't know, Partick Thistle in Scotland. They're the sort of club that will go and beat Celtic one weekend and then lose at home to Hamilton Accies the next. And Energetik seem to be a team like that, very good against the bigger sides. And in games where you're expecting them to go on and win, dare I mention Belshina, we don't turn up or we're unlucky and the result that we're all expecting doesn't come. So I hope your optimism is well placed and that we can turn it around.
John, thanks a lot for that. Really, really good. Really enjoyable. Loved some of your comparisons. Always love a good dig at Dinamo Minsk as well, as you well know. But yes, excellent stuff. Pessimistic, Dan. Optimistic as usual. I need to be somewhere in between, I suppose, Dan. I'm not quite sure where that makes me.
1-0 to us. Done. Boom.
I think a lot for me depends on, again, as always, which team we pick, who's available. I'm really pleased with Sokol being back in the side. I suppose overall it wasn't a dreadful defensive performance, unlike the previous week. I really hope Mukhamaddov is available. I think Mukhamaddov and Bakic as a front two would be fantastic. Thought Bashilov was a bit better. So we've got Bashilov and Noshko in the middle. I'd like Umarov to have more than 60 minutes. Maybe look at this guy Osnov as a left wing back. But then you know to fit Moatu in somewhere. I did see quite an interesting formation on one of the chats this week suggesting that we sort of play Moatu and Umarov either side of Bakic, which would be a really interesting one, really attacking, but it would require a change in the beloved 3-5-2 formation. So yeah, a 1-0 victory wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility. I'm interested that you think they're going to go back to keeping clean sheets, Dan. But we'll be there regardless. It's 2:00 on Sunday, so we will always try to get there for courses too, but we'll probably be there for 5-2. In the meantime, take good care of yourselves.
Indeed. Take care.
Thanks again for taking time out of your busy lives to listen to us talk about a team whom we knew nothing not so long ago, but who we now hold dear to our football supporting hearts. Please do contact us with comments and suggestions if you have any. My Twitter handle is @AGameInSpain and Dan's is @MajorDanB. That's with an A at the end. If, like us, you feel like talking about Energetik most days of the week, or even just at weekends, please do contact Dan and he will add you to the Energetik Ultras Twitter chat. We'll be back next week, but until then, please do stay Energetik. We firmly believe that you won't regret it. Do svidania.